name is Melva Marilyn Withers, with Wolkoff was my original surname. And I was born in Seward, Alaska. I was old enough to know what was happening. I knew that my uncles went off to war, and Uncle Nick was a paratrooper. Uncle George ended up in Australia, and they would send letters to my daddy, because Mama and Daddy always told me, they will be back. You'll be able to see Uncle Nick and Uncle George. And then Daddy found out that his brother Nick was shot down during one of the paratroop trips over Belgium. And I learned that I wouldn't get to see him. I remember the paper that came, and Grandma read it to me, about Private Nick Wolkoff. And she was very proud of the sacrifice. And she was known as a Gold Star Mother. In Seward, we had a big billboard that was just up the street from where I lived. And I understood what it meant. And there were a number of them. But Uncle Nick was the first one who passed. We had an army base in Seward. It was called Fort Raymond. And the area that is claimed now, where Fort Raymond was, has been turned into a grocery store and various other projects. It ended up being one of the military vacation spots in Seward. So they had vacation campground down there for a while before it turned into businesses. But it was right there near the Jesse Lee home. And I got used to going to the Jesse Lee home with Mama, even though I was a little girl. Ruby Byrne was my age. Her mother and dad had Kawabi's laundry after Kawabi's left Seward. They were not permitted to remain. And that's when I began to learn that people were different. I had not known that, but when the Kawabis had to leave town, I didn't understand that. They were nice people, very nice people, but because they were a foreign race, they had to leave. And I'd never understood that when I was young. It didn't make sense to me. So, but they did leave, and they never got a chance to come back, because what happened was the Burns family were the ones that picked up the laundry and kept it going. And so and we had GIs who would come to our house because my mama and daddy welcomed everyone. And they would come and visit with us. And the one man's name that became so familiar to me and so wonderful, because he'd bring us presents and things like that for our birthdays and for Christmas. He brought me a lovely doll, and he brought my sister's dolls, and his name is Sam Rios. I remember that to this day because he was so dear to us. I mean, sometimes Ruby and her sister Margaret would come down and play with us in those big concrete huts, because we could climb on top of them And we would go around and around the top. We would sit on there and look out toward Resurrection Bay and have a wonderful time. But there were a lot of wonderful things that we enjoyed during the war. You know, I used to watch the men from Fort Raymond march back and forth on our street. I lived at 229 Fifth Avenue, which is now a parking lot. But also, watching the men gave me what was happening during the war. They would also patrol our streets, and that was when Daddy had to build a bomb shelter. And what it was dirt, just dirt. And we did have to go down in the bomb shelter every once in a while. And when they would wind up that siren that said we had to, everything dark, lights out, we did that. And there could be no light showing from anywhere. We couldn't turn on a flashlight or nothing. And so I got to go to what was the GI, I called it the GI theater, because we didn't have a theater at the time. We had one before the war came, and it was the same one that they're using now. They set up a makeshift theater over by First Lake, and what they put in this building was sofas, folding chairs, any kind of chair that they could get, and it became a theater. And I asked Daddy why we had to go to this theater. They were showing movies, and we had to pay, but not very much. But they said, well, the man who owns the theater where we used to go is telling some of the Native people that they can't go there anymore. But see, the key part of that for us was my daddy's father was Japanese. And I didn't know that at the time. I got a very, very bad letter when the war was going. Someone wrote me a letter, even though I was just a school child, and they said, I hate you, and just some terrible things in it. And I let my mother read it. But see, I didn't know that I was. I didn't know that. And so, yeah, my family has a Russian background, but it also has this little part that was part of Daddy's life, not mine, because I didn't know anything about that. If he did, he never told us about it, because I went through my life up until I got that letter. I had never known. I had suspected. Then I found the key thing. So Daddy kept his things in the garage. The tools were on the shelf in boxes, but so were other things in there. And I was just looking one day, and he worked, like I said, he worked on the railroad, and he did have his railroad identification there. And that's how I found out that his name that he was born with was not Walkoff. It was changed to Walkoff because our family, the uncle he was raised by was Walkoff. And because the father, the person who fathered him, was a fisherman from Japan. And that really surprised me, because I asked him, I said, why do they have this name here by your name? And he said, what did you find? I said, this is something to do with your railroad. Oh, okay. Well, I'll keep that. I said, well, I can put it back. No, it's okay. They wanted that part to remain hidden because, of course, of the war. You know, people who were Japanese were out the door. People knew, in Seward, they knew my family. But at that time, that grandfather didn't exist. My Russian grandfather did. And of course, I knew him. That's the grandpa that I know. That's why I never knew my background until I got, just before I went to Okinawa as a military wife. And
what year? About what year?
I can tell you when it was. It was July 1962.
Wow.